The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the polished oak walls of Mustang Ridge Manor. Outside, December snow fell thick and silent over Montana, blanketing the world in white. Inside, warmth. Inside, memory. Garrett Stone sat in his leather chair, 78 years worn into his face like rivers carved into ancient rock. His hands, gnarled and scarred, rested on the armrests. 3 fingers on his right hand ended at the second knuckle. Frostbite. 40 years ago, a price paid in blood and ice. Across from him, his grandson Daniel perched on the edge of the sofa, 12 years old and hungry for stories the way only boys that age can be. The boy's eyes reflected the firelight, wide and waiting. "Grandpa," Daniel said, his voice soft with reverence, "everyone says you're the richest man in Montana, that you built all this from nothing." Garrett's lips curved, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. "From nothing?" He shook his head slowly. "No, son, I built this from everything. There's a difference." He reached for the poker, stirred the fire. Sparks rose like memories ascending. "You think I'm rich because I inherited it? Because I was lucky?" He paused, let the question hang. "I'm rich because I learned what it means to lose everything. And once you know that, truly know it, money becomes just a tool, nothing more." Daniel leaned forward. "Tell me." Garrett closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were looking not at the boy, but through him. Through 40 years, through walls and time and all the distance between who he'd been and who he'd become. "December 1884, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I died that month, not from a bullet, not from the cold, but from the eyes of a starving child." The old man settled deeper into his chair. "Let me tell you about the ghost I used to be." Ash Hollow, Wyoming Territory, December 3rd, 1884. The wind howled like something dying, tearing through the crooked wooden buildings with teeth made of ice. Snow fell sideways, driven by gusts that turned the world into a white blur. What had been mud in autumn was now frozen earth, hard as iron, cracked and cruel. Morning, but you wouldn't know it. The sky hung low and gray, the color of old dishwater, pressing down on the town like a lid on a coffin. Temperature, 15 below zero. Felt like 30 below with the wind. At the edge of the town's open-air market, what remained of it in the deep winter, a butcher worked over a freshly killed deer. His knife flashed in practiced rhythm, separating meat from bone. Blood steamed against the snow, a violent red that stood out against all that white-like sin against innocence. Around him, a handful of townspeople bartered in hushed tones, shoulders hunched against the cold, breath clouding the air in small ghosts. Just beyond the stalls, where footprints vanished as fast as they were made, a woman stood. Still, silent, like a tree that had frozen in place. She wore a patched wool coat too thin for the season, pulled tight around her shoulders with hands that trembled. Not from cold alone, from fear, from desperation, from the hollow knowledge that comes when you've reached the end of everything and found nothing there but more emptiness. In one arm, she held a baby. The child's face nearly disappeared in the folds of a threadbare shawl, only the smallest hint of pale skin visible, the faintest rise and fall of breath. 4 more children huddled close to her legs like refugees seeking shelter from a storm. Which is exactly what they were. The oldest was a boy, perhaps 12, thin shoulders, hollow cheeks, eyes that held too much knowledge for his years. He kept one hand on his mother's coat, the other trying to keep the younger ones from crying. His name was Elijah Harper. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Beside him, a girl of 10. She held her younger sister's hand with a grip that said she'd never let go, not even if the world itself tried to pry them apart. Sarah Harper. Her lips moved in silent prayer, words her mother had taught her when they still had food to pray over. Then a boy of 8, Thomas Harper. His eyes had gone distant, hollow, the way eyes do when hunger stops being an ache and becomes just a fact. A piece of the world you accept the way you accept gravity. A girl of 6 came next, Rebecca Harper. She coughed, a wet, rattling sound that spoke of things growing in small lungs. Her lips had a faint blue tinge despite the scarf wrapped around her face and the baby. Mary Harper, 3 years old, sucking on her own thumb for comfort, for the illusion of sustenance, not understanding yet that thumbs provide no calories. Their mother's name was Eliza Harper. 32 years old, widow, once the wife of a carpenter in Missouri, once a woman with a home, with hope, with a future that stretched out bright and possible. Now just another shadow in the west, where dreams came to starve. They had walked 3 days through snowfall to reach Ash Hollow. 3 days carrying only what their backs could bear, which wasn't much. Everything else, sold or traded or left behind in graves, both literal and metaphorical. Eliza didn't step forward, didn't call out, didn't beg. Instead, as the butcher wiped his hands on his apron and turned to serve the next customer, a man in a thick coat counting out coins for a pound of venison, she whispered, just whispered. But somehow, despite the wind, despite the distance, despite everything, her words carried. We haven't eaten in 4 days. The butcher didn't hear, or pretended not to. A woman nearby, face wrapped in a thick scarf, glanced their way, then quickly tugged her own child in the opposite direction. Someone chuckled from the saloon down the street, the sound cutting through the moment like a knife through flesh. Eliza bowed her head. The baby in her arms made a small sound, somewhere between a whimper and a sigh. And then, movement. Across the square near the shadow of the blacksmith's forge where the overhang provided some shelter from the driving snow, stood a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wore a dark wool coat that had seen better years but was still well made, the kind of coat that spoke of quality even through the wear. His boots were old but solid, leather scuffed but oiled. A wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face, hiding his features in shadow. But his hands told a different story. They were rough, yes, scarred and calloused from work, but the nails were clean, and when he shifted his weight, something glinted in his coat pocket. A watch chain, gold, the kind of thing a ranch hand making $30 a month shouldn't own. The kind of thing worth more than 3 months' wages. He noticed it himself, the glint catching his eye. Quickly, almost instinctively, he tucked it deeper into his pocket, hiding it away like a secret. The man's name was Garrett Stone, though no one in Ash Hollow knew that. Here he was Wade Monroe, just another drifter, another ranch hand, another nobody trying to survive another winter. 38 years old, a face that had forgotten how to smile, a scar that ran from his jaw down to his collarbone, visible even in shadow, a pale line that marked him as someone who'd survived something terrible. He stood watching the woman and her 5 children for a long moment. His jaw worked, chewing something invisible. Not tobacco, just air, just the bitter taste of memory. Then he stepped forward, no announcement, no greeting, just the crunch of boots on snow, steady and deliberate. He approached Elijah first, the oldest boy, knelt down slowly, carefully, the way you approach a wounded animal. The boy's eyes went wide, body tensing to run or fight, but too weak to do either. Garrett unslung his saddlebag. From inside, he pulled out a wrapped bundle. Smoked venison, a full pound, maybe more. Then a round of hard bread, the kind that lasted through winter if you kept it dry. Then a small tin of beans. One by one, he placed them in Elijah's hands. The boy stared at the food like it was a hallucination. Like if he blinked, it would vanish into the snow. Little Mary reached out too eagerly, her small hands grasping. She nearly dropped her share. Garrett caught it before it hit the ground, held it steady, then placed it carefully in her palms. His hands, so large they could have crushed hers, were gentle as prayer. He looked at the child, not at her eyes, couldn't bear that. Instead at her hands, at the way her fingers curled around the bread like it was more precious than gold. It was. Eliza opened her mouth to speak, to thank him, to ask his name, to ask why. But Garrett was already standing, already turning away. He adjusted his coat against the wind and walked back toward the blacksmith's forge, his figure blending into shadow and snow. "Mama," Thomas whispered, staring after the stranger. "Who was that?" Eliza clutched the baby tighter. Her eyes followed the man until he disappeared completely around the corner of the forge, swallowed by the storm. "I don't know," she murmured, but something in her voice had changed. Not hope, not yet, but something close. Something like the first breath after drowning. Around them, the market continued. The butcher served another customer. The snow fell. The wind howled its endless howl. But for 5 starving children and one mother at the edge of breaking, A stranger's quiet act had just held back the darkness. For one more day, one more night. For now, that was enough. The barn loft at Mustang Ridge Ranch smelled of hay and horse and leather. Good smells, honest smells, the kind that came from work and animals, and the simple fact of existing in the world without pretense. Garrett Stone lay on his bedroll, staring up at the rough-hewn beams overhead. A single lantern burned low nearby, casting more shadow than light. Outside, the wind rattled the barn walls, but here, insulated by hay and the warmth of horses below, it was almost comfortable. He'd been awake since 3 in the morning. Sleep came hard these days, harder every year. When it did come, it brought dreams, and dreams brought Dakota. He sat up, reached for the small wooden box beside his bedroll. Inside, a few possessions. Not many. A man who lived like a ghost didn't need much. A knife, well-maintained, a whetstone, a compass that had belonged to his father, and at the bottom, wrapped in oilcloth, a small carved bird. Unfinished. The wings barely begun, the body still rough. He'd been working on it for 10 years. Still wasn't done. Wasn't sure he ever would be. Garrett set the box aside and pulled on his boots. Time to start the day. Time to be Wade Monroe, the quiet ranch hand who kept to himself, who worked harder than anyone else, who never complained, never asked for more than his $30 a month and a place to sleep. Time to be someone there than himself. He climbed down the ladder from the loft, boots finding each rung by memory in the dim pre-dawn light. Below, the horses stirred in their stalls, recognizing his footsteps. He moved among them, checking water, adjusting blankets, speaking in low tones that calmed. "Morning, Ash," he said to the Morgan mare in the corner stall. 8 years old, loyal as a dog. She nickered softly, pressed her nose against his palm. He'd bought her 5 years ago with money that had meant nothing. Money was easy. Garrett Stone had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. But it bought nothing that mattered. Couldn't buy sleep. Couldn't buy forgetting. Couldn't bring back a 7-year-old Cheyenne boy from the snow. The barn door creaked open. Jake Sutton, the ranch foreman, stomped in, shaking snow from his coat. "Wade," he called out, "you're up early, again." "Can't sleep," Garrett said simply. Jake was a good man, fair, honest. Worked hard and expected the same from others. He'd hired Wade Monroe 3 years ago, never asked questions about his past, never pried, just gave him work and paid him fair. He had no idea he was paying the ranch owner to work on his own ranch. "Got the Mustangs coming in today," Jake said. "Need you on the braking. You got a gift with them wild ones." Garrett nodded. "I'll handle it." "Good man." Jake clapped him on the shoulder, then headed toward the feed room. A gift with wild things, maybe. Or maybe he just understood what it felt like to be untamed and broken at the same time. He finished with the horses and stepped outside. Dawn was just beginning to break, a pale gray light that barely qualified as sunrise. The ranch stretched out before him, 5,000 acres of Montana grassland and timber. Worth a fortune. His fortune. And he lived in a barn. The main house stood a quarter-mile away, a large structure built by his father, William Stone, dead 8 years now from consumption, coughing blood into handkerchiefs until there was no blood left to cough. Garrett hadn't set foot in that house since the funeral. Couldn't. The ghosts there were different than the ones in the barn. Those ghosts had expectations. He turned away from it, walked toward the breaking pen where the Mustangs would be delivered. Work. That was the answer. Always work. Exhaust the body so the mind couldn't wander, couldn't remember. But memory came anyway. It always did. Fort Laramie, December 1874, 10 years ago. Lieutenant Garrett Stone, 28 years old, sat in the officer's tent, listening to Colonel Marcus Whitmore outline the mission. "The Cheyenne village on the Red River has been raiding supply lines," Whitmore said, his voice flat and cold as the winter night. "Command wants it eliminated. No survivors over the age of 5. Those are the orders." Around the tent, other officers nodded. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked indifferent. This was the way of things. This was policy. This was how you won a war against people who refused to stop being people. Garrett felt something twist in his stomach. "Sir," he said carefully. "Children?" Whitmore's eyes snapped to him. "The children grow into warriors, Lieutenant. We cut the problem at the root, or we fight this war forever. Do you have an issue following orders? Every man in the tent was looking at him now, waiting. No, sir, Garrett heard himself say, but it was a lie, and they both knew it. 2 nights later, they rode out. 30 men, rifles loaded, torches ready. The village sat in a hollow by the river, teepees arranged in a circle, smoke rising from evening fires. The smell of cooking meat, the sound of voices, children laughing somewhere in the dark. Garrett sat on his horse, looking down at it. His rifle felt heavy in his hands, heavier than iron, heavier than bone. On my signal, Whitmore said. The signal came. Fire, screaming, the night tearing itself apart. Garrett rode in with the others. His rifle bucked in his hands, but he aimed high, over heads, into the sky. Around him, men fired into crowds, into families, into everything that moved. He saw a child running, a boy, maybe 7 years old, small, terrified, running away from the flames toward the river. Garrett turned his horse, chased after him. A voice behind him. "Stone, where are you going?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. He caught up to the boy, leaned down, scooped him up with one arm. The child fought, small fists pounding against him, but Garrett held firm. He rode, hard, fast, away from the burning village, away from the screams, away from everything he'd just been part of. 2 miles, 3, until the sounds faded behind him and there was only the night and the snow and the small body trembling in his arms. He dismounted in a hollow protected from the wind, set the boy down gently. The child stared at him with eyes that held too much fear, too much understanding, too much knowledge of what men could do. "What's your name?" Garrett asked in broken Cheyenne. He knew a little. Not much, enough. The boy didn't answer at first. Then so quietly, Garrett almost didn't hear. "Dakota." "Dakota," Garrett repeated. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to keep you warm, okay?" He had no plan beyond that, no idea what came next. He only knew he couldn't ride back, couldn't return to men who'd just done what they'd done. He stripped off his coat, wrapped it around the boy, built a fire with his last matches, hands shaking from cold and adrenaline and the weight of choice. They sat together through the night, the boy silent, Garrett silent, the fire flickering between them like the last point of light in a world gone dark. By morning, the temperature had dropped to 40 below. The fire had died. The matches were gone. Dakota shivered uncontrollably. Garrett held him, tried to share what warmth his own body could provide, but it wasn't enough. It was never enough. "Stay with me," Garrett whispered. "Please, stay with me." The boy looked up at him. His lips were blue, his breathing shallow. "You're a good man," Dakota said in Cheyenne, or that's what Garrett thought he said. His understanding of the language was limited. Then the boy closed his eyes. Garrett felt the small body go still in his arms. He sat there for another hour, holding the child, unable to let go, unable to accept what had just happened. He'd tried to save one, just one, out of the dozens who died that night, and he'd failed. Eventually, he dug a grave with his bare hands, the frozen earth fighting him with every inch. He buried Dakota beneath a birch tree, marked it with stones. With his knife, he carved into the bark, Dakota, 1867, 1874. Then he walked away, left his rifle, left his horse, just walked. 3 days later, he reached his father's ranch in Montana, walked through the door without explanation. His father took one look at him and asked no questions. 2 years later, his father died, leaving everything to his only son. And Garrett Stone, millionaire, moved into the barn and tried to figure out how to be someone worthy of the fortune he didn't deserve. The present snapped back into focus. Garrett stood in the breaking pen, watching a young Mustang circle nervously. The horse's eyes rolled white with fear, nostrils flaring. "Easy," Garrett murmured. "Easy now." He moved slowly, hands open, showing he held no rope, no whip, nothing but patience. The horse watched him, waiting. "I know," Garrett said softly. "I know you want to run. I know you don't trust anyone. I understand." He took another step. The horse backed up, snorted. "But running doesn't solve anything," Garrett continued. "I've been running 10 years. Hasn't helped yet." Another step. Closer now. The horse's muscles tensed, ready to bolt. "You can trust me," Garrett whispered. "I won't hurt you. I only hurt things I'm trying to save." His hand reached out, slow as sunrise, touched the horse's nose. The Mustang flinched but didn't run. "There," Garrett said. "See? Not so bad." Behind him, Jake watched from the fence, shaking his head in amazement. "I swear, Wade, you could gentle the devil himself if you wanted." Garrett said nothing, but he thought, "I can't even gentle myself." That evening, after the work was done and the other hands had gone to the bunkhouse for dinner, Garrett saddled Ash and rode into town. He had business, the kind of business Wade Monroe couldn't be seen doing, the kind that required being someone else entirely. He rode past Ash Hollow proper, past the saloon and the mercantile and the boarding house where Mrs. Bertha Kelty ran a respectable establishment for respectable people. He rode to the small office at the edge of town where a man named Howard Blackwell practiced law. The only man in Wyoming territory who knew Wade Monroe was actually Garrett Stone. Blackwell looked up from his desk as Garrett entered, shaking snow from his coat. "Mr. Stone," he said, standing, "I wasn't expecting you." "Need to make a payment," Garrett said. He pulled out an envelope. Inside, $100 in gold certificates. 3 months' rent at Mrs. Kelty's boarding house if you were paying for one person. More than enough for 6. "For who?" Blackwell asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "The widow Harper and her children. Pay Mrs. Kelty. Tell her it's from an anonymous benefactor. Tell her they can stay as long as needed." Blackwell nodded slowly. "You know, you could just talk to them yourself. Tell them who you are. They'd be grateful." "I don't want gratitude," Garrett said. "What do you want?" Garrett looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked back out into the snow without answering. What did he want? He didn't know anymore. Once he'd wanted to be a good soldier, then he'd wanted to be a good son, then he'd wanted to save a child. Now he just wanted to not fail anyone else. He rode back toward the ranch but detoured past the old Meyer cabin on the western edge of the tree line. Gustav Meyer's place, abandoned since the old trapper had frozen to death 2 winters back. The cabin was dark, empty, or so he thought. But as he drew closer, he saw light flickering through the gaps in the walls. Not much, just the faint glow of a struggling fire. Someone was living there. He dismounted, approached on foot. Through a crack in the door, he could see inside. Eliza Harper sat on the floor, her back against the wall, all 5 children huddled around her for warmth. They were eating the food he'd given them that morning, rationing it carefully, a bite for each child, none for herself. The cabin was in terrible condition, roof sagging, floor rotted in places, wind blowing through gaps in the walls that let in almost as much cold as if there were no walls at all. Little Mary coughed, then coughed again. The sound rattled in her small chest. Garrett's jaw tightened. He remounted Ash and rode back to town, to the mercantile, which was just closing. "I need supplies," he told the owner. "Lumber, nails, tar paper, straw, and medicine. Cough medicine." The owner looked at him skeptically. "That'll cost considerable, Wade. You got that kind of money?" Garrett pulled out a $50 gold piece, set it on the counter. The owner's eyes went wide. "Where'd a ranch hand get that?" "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." The man bit the coin, checking it was real. "I'll have it ready tomorrow." "Tonight," Garrett said. "I'll pick it up after midnight, and I need discretion." "Costs extra." Garrett put down another 20. The owner nodded. "Midnight it is." That night, long after the town had gone to sleep, Garrett returned with a wagon, loaded it with supplies in silence. The mercantile owner helped, asking no questions, which was worth every extra dollar. Garrett drove the wagon to the Meyer cabin, then stopped 100 yards away. Couldn't get closer. Couldn't risk waking them. Couldn't risk them seeing his face. He unloaded everything quietly, carried it to the cabin in armfuls. Then, working by moonlight, he began. First, the floor. He stuffed straw and moss into the gaps between the boards, packing it tight to block the wind. Took him 2 hours, working on his knees in the snow. Next, the roof. He climbed up carefully, distributing his weight to avoid falling through the rotten sections. Patched the worst holes with tar paper and new shingles. Not a permanent fix, but enough to keep out the snow. Then the windows. Two were broken completely, just holes in the wall. He nailed boards across them, creating a seal. Not pretty, but functional. Finally, he stacked the remaining lumber and supplies near the door, left them where they'd be found come morning. He worked until 4 in the morning. His hands were numb, his back ached. But the cabin was better. Not good, not even close to good, but better. Better might be enough to keep them alive until spring. As he was about to leave, he heard a sound from inside. A child crying, quickly hushed. He froze, listening. Eliza's voice, soft and tired. "Shh, sweetheart. It's okay. Mama's here." The crying stopped. Garrett stood in the snow, listening to a mother comfort a child, and felt something break inside his chest. Some wall he'd built 10 years ago. Some barrier between then and now. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the small carved bird, still unfinished after all these years. He looked at it for a longer moment, then set it carefully on the doorstep, where it would be found in the morning. A gift, a promise, a prayer carved in wood. Then he climbed back on the wagon and rode away into the darkness, another ghost among many in the Wyoming winter night. 3 days passed. Garrett returned each night, never the same time, never predictable, always careful, always invisible. The second night, he repaired the door. It had been hanging crooked on broken hinges, letting in drafts that cut through the cabin like knives. He replaced the hinges, planed the frame, made it fit properly, then left a basket of food by the door. Bread, potatoes, turnips, dried meat. The third night, he cleaned the chimney, climbed onto the roof and pulled out years of bird nests and debris that had been choking the flue. The smoke inside the cabin had been thick enough to taste. Now it would draw properly. Now the fire would actually warm instead of just smoldering. He left more food, more medicine, a blanket, always gone before dawn, always leaving no trace except the gifts themselves. On the fourth night, something changed. He was chopping wood 100 yards from the cabin, building a supply that would last them at least a week. The rhythmic thunk of the axe against wood, the split of grain, the satisfying crack as pieces fell away. He didn't hear the child approach. Didn't realize anyone was there until a small voice said, "Are you an angel?" Garrett spun around. Thomas Harper stood 10 feet away, wearing nothing but a thin nightshirt, bare feet in the snow, 8 years old, shivering, staring at him with eyes that held wonder instead of fear. For a long moment, neither of them moved. "You should go back inside," Garrett said finally, his voice rough. "You'll freeze." "Mama says an angel is helping us," Thomas said. "She says only God could send someone so kind." "I'm not an angel," Garrett said. "Just a man." "Angels always say that," Thomas replied with the certainty of childhood. "In the Bible." Despite everything, Garrett almost smiled. Almost. "Go inside," he said again, "before your mother worries." Thomas didn't move. "What's your name?" Garrett hesitated. Then, "Wade." "I'm Thomas. Thank you, Mr. Wade, for everything." The boy turned and ran back to the cabin, disappearing through the door before Garrett could say anything else. He stood there, axe in hand, staring after the child. Not an angel, just a man trying to become one. He finished the wood, stacked it neatly under the eaves where it would stay dry, then mounted his horse and rode away. But this time he looked back. Through the window he could see them, Eliza and her 5 children gathered around the fire. Thomas was gesturing animatedly, clearly telling them about the mysterious man in the woods. Garrett watched for a moment longer, then turned Ash toward home. Tomorrow would be 5 days since he'd first seen them. 5 days of repairs, of food, of care given in darkness. 5 days of trying to save what he'd failed to save 10 years ago. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And sometimes, something was all you had. The 5th night brought disaster. Garrett arrived at his usual time, 2 hours past midnight, carrying more supplies. But before he even reached the cabin, he heard it. Coughing, hard, racking coughs that sounded like they were tearing something loose inside. He approached the window, looked in. Rebecca, the 6-year-old, lay on a blanket near the fire. Her face was flushed with fever. Her breath came in short, desperate gasps. Between gasps, she coughed. Each cough produced a wet, rattling sound that spoke of fluid in places fluid shouldn't be. Pneumonia, or close to it. Eliza knelt beside her, wiping the child's face with a damp cloth. Her hands shook, not from cold, from fear. "Mama," Rebecca whispered between coughs. "It hurts." "I know, baby, I know." Sarah sat nearby, holding Rebecca's hand. The other children huddled together, watching with witty, frightened eyes. Even at their age, they understood what sickness meant out here, what it could take. Garrett backed away from the window, his mind raced. She needed medicine, real medicine. Quinine, if it was available. Something to bring down the fever. Something to clear her lungs. The town doctor would have it. But the town doctor cost money. Money Eliza didn't have. Garrett did. Garrett Stone had more money than he could spend. But Wade Monroe, ranch hand, couldn't walk into the doctor's office at 2 in the morning with a $50 gold piece and not raise questions. He stood in the snow, thinking, calculating, planning. Then he mounted Ash and rode hard toward Laramie City, 40 miles east, the nearest large town, where he could buy medicine without anyone knowing Wade Monroe from Ash Hollow, where he could be Garrett Stone for one night. He rode through what remained of the darkness and into the gray dawn. The cold bit through his coat, but he ignored it. Ash's breath came in great clouds, but she didn't slow. Good horse, loyal horse. She understood when speed mattered. They reached Laramie City by mid-morning. Garrett went straight to the largest pharmacy, walked in covered in road dust and melted snow. "I need quinine," he told the pharmacist. "High dose, and camphor oil, and honey, and whiskey." The pharmacist looked him over. "That's for pneumonia treatment. You sick?" "Someone I know." "That'll be $14. Garrett pulled out a $20 gold piece, set it on the counter. The pharmacist's eyebrows rose, but he asked no questions. Just prepared the medicines, wrapped them carefully, handed them over with the change. Garrett pocketed the change, left the pharmacy, remounted Ash, and rode 40 miles back. By the time he reached the Meyer cabin again, it was late afternoon. The sun, what little of it had broken through the clouds, was already setting, temperature dropping. He dismounted, took the medicines from his saddlebag, and approached the cabin. For the first time, he didn't wait until dark. Didn't hide. Just walked up to the door and knocked. The door opened. Eliza stood there, exhausted, eyes red from crying or lack of sleep or both. She saw him. Recognition flickered across her face. The man from the market, the one who'd given them food. "You," she whispered. Garrett held out the medicines. "For your daughter. The instructions are written on each bottle, 2 drops of quinine every 4 hours. Rub the camphor oil on her chest. Mix honey in warm water. Have her drink it to soothe the throat. Whiskey is for you, to sterilize cloths before wiping her face." Eliza took the medicines with trembling hands, stared at them, then at him. "Why am I?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Garrett met her eyes for just a moment, then looked away. Couldn't hold that gaze, couldn't bear the gratitude he saw there. "Because she deserves to live," he said simply. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. "Wait," Eliza called after him. "I don't even know your name." He paused, didn't turn around. "You don't need to." "Yes, I do. I need to know who to thank, who to pray for." A long silence. The wind blew snow between them. "Wade," he said finally. "Wade Monroe." He mounted Ash and rode away before she could ask anything else. Behind him, through the cabin's broken windows, he heard a child's voice. "Mama, who was that?" And Eliza's answer, full of wonder and confusion and hope. "I think he's our guardian angel." Garrett rode faster, putting distance between himself and those words. Not an angel, never an angel, just a man who'd let one child die and would do anything, pay anything, risk anything to keep it from happening again. That night, Sheriff Cole Harlow sat in his office, a telegram in his hands. He'd received it 3 days ago, kept it in his desk drawer, unsure what to do with it, unsure if he wanted to do anything at all. The telegram read, "ATTN, Sheriff's Wyoming Territory. Stop wanted for desertion. Fort Laramie, 1874, stop. LT, Garrett Stone, stop, 38 years old, stop, scar. Neck to collar, bone, stop, last, was. Banon, Montana, stop, bounty, $800, stop, dead or alive, stop." Sheriff Harlow had known Wade Monroe for 3 years. Quiet man, hard worker, never caused trouble, never asked for anything, and he had a scar, neck to collarbone, exactly as described. The sheriff folded the telegram, put it back in his drawer, locked it. He'd think about it. Maybe. Or maybe he'd lose it. Papers got lost all the time. But as he locked his office and walked home through the snow, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was coming. The kind of trouble that arrived whether you wanted it or not. The kind that always arrived right when people thought they might finally be safe. December 18th, 2 weeks since Garrett had first seen Eliza Harper and her children at the market. Rebecca was better. The fever had broken. The cough remained but had lost its dangerous rattle. She would live. Garrett had continued his nighttime visits, though less frequently now. Didn't want to draw attention, didn't want anyone to notice the pattern, but he couldn't stop completely. Couldn't just walk away now that he'd started. So he came every few days, left food, left firewood, left small repairs completed in darkness. And each time he found something new waiting for him. A drawing, charcoal on wood, crude but heartfelt. Sarah Harper, the 10-year-old, had started leaving them. Pictures of her family, pictures of the cabin, pictures of a tall man in a dark hat standing beside them, like a silent guardian. Garrett collected them without meaning to, kept them folded in his coat pocket, looked at them sometimes when he was alone in the barn loft, trying to understand why they mattered. On this night, the 18th, he found another drawing waiting. This one different from the rest. It showed 7 people, a woman, 5 children, and a man, holding hands, and all together. And in the corner, written in a child's careful letters, "Our family." Garrett stood in the snow holding the drawing and felt something shift inside him. Some tectonic plate of emotion he'd thought permanently frozen. Our family. He carefully folded the drawing, put it in his pocket next to his heart. Then he heard hooves, multiple horses, coming fast. He melted back into the tree line, watching. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. Rough-looking men, armed. They stopped in front of the cabin, dismounted. The leader was tall and lean with a face like a hatchet. Cold eyes, colder smile. He wore a long coat that had seen better days and a gun belt that had seen plenty of use. His name was Cyrus Blackwood, debt collector, bounty hunter, general-purpose villain who made his living off other people's misery. The 2 men with him were Bull Murphy, built like his name, and Frank Creed, thin and mean as a knife. Cyrus walked up to the cabin door, knocked hard. From his position in the trees, Garrett couldn't hear the words, but he could see everything. Eliza opened the door, saw the men, her face went pale. Cyrus was talking, gesturing. Eliza shook her head, backed up, tried to close the door. Cyrus put his boot in the gap, kept it open. Behind Eliza, Garrett could see the children gathering, frightened. Elijah, the oldest, moved in front of his younger siblings, 12 years old, trying to be the man of the family. Cyrus pushed the door wider, stepped inside. His men followed. Garrett's hand went to his knife. He didn't carry a gun anymore. Hadn't for 10 years. But he had a knife. Always a knife. He moved closer, staying in shadow until he could hear. Cyrus was saying, "Your husband owed us $600. Now with interest, that's $1,200. "He's dead," Eliza said, her voice shaking but firm. "I have nothing." "Then you got 5 things we can take." Cyrus gestured at the children. "Nice, healthy kids. Market's good for young workers. 150 each, maybe 200. That'd cover the debt." "You can't," Eliza whispered. "They're children." "Their payment." Cyrus smiled, not a nice smile. "Law's on my side, lady. Unpaid debts transfer to family. You want to settle? Settle. You can't? Then we take what we can get." Bull stepped forward, reached for Elijah. The boy swung, a wild, desperate punch that connected with Bull's stomach and did absolutely nothing. Bull laughed, grabbed Elijah by the collar, lifted him off the ground. And that's when Garrett stepped out of the shadows. He didn't announce himself, didn't threaten, just appeared in the doorway like a ghost materializing from smoke. "Put the boy down," he said. His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but something in it made Bull freeze. Cyrus turned, looked at Garrett. Recognition flickered in his eyes, though he couldn't place why. This ain't your business, friend, Cyrus said. I'm making it my business. You know who I am? Cyrus Blackwood, debt collector, works for the territorial banks, sometimes for himself. Garrett took a step into the cabin. I know exactly who you are. Cyrus studied him, eyes narrowing. I know you from somewhere. Doubt it. No, I've seen your face. Cyrus moved closer. Then his eyes widened. You're him, the deserter. There's a poster, Fort Laramie, $800 bounty. Garrett said nothing, but something in his silence confirmed it. Cyrus smiled, bigger this time. Real pleasure. Boys, we just hit gold. This ain't no drifter. This is Lieutenant Garrett Stone. And if that last name sounds familiar, it should. William Stone owned Bad Mustang Ridge. 5,000 acres. Died 8 years back. Left everything to his only son. He looked at Garrett with new appreciation, new greed. You're the millionaire rancher, Cyrus said, living like a bum. Now ain't that interesting? Bull dropped Elijah. The boy scrambled back to his mother. Cyrus pulled out a cigar, lit it, took a long drag. Here's the new deal, Stone. You pay the widow's debt, $1,200, plus $500 for my silence about your identity. Otherwise, I tell the sheriff. Otherwise, Fort Laramie gets its deserter back. Otherwise, you hang. Garrett stood very still. The knife at his belt felt heavy, felt like possibility, felt like the 10-year-old promise he'd made to never kill again. And if I refuse, he asked, then I take the kids tonight, and tomorrow I collect your bounty. Either way, I win. Silence, long and heavy. Then Garrett said, give me 24 hours. I need to get the money from Denver. 12 hours, Cyrus countered. Noon tomorrow. Meet me at the saloon. Cash. If you run, I burn this cabin to the ground with everyone inside. He walked to the door, paused beside Garrett. You made a mistake, Stone. You tried to care. Out here, that's weakness. And weakness gets you killed. Cyrus and his men left, hooves fading into darkness. Garrett stood in the doorway watching them go. Behind him, he could hear the children crying, Eliza trying to comfort them. He turned, found her looking at him. Is it true, she asked. Are you really a millionaire? Yes. Why live like this? Garrett looked at the 5 children, at their frightened faces, at Elijah, who had tried to fight a man 3 times his size to protect his family. Because money doesn't wash blood off your hands, he said quietly. He walked to the door, stopped. I'll fix this, he said without turning around. I promise. Then he was gone, swallowed by the Wyoming night. Behind him, Eliza stood holding her children, wondering what kind of man promises to save strangers when he can't even save himself. Wondering if guardian angels came broken. Wondering if broken was the only kind that lasted. The frame shifted. The firelight in 1924 flickered across Garrett Stone's weathered face as he paused in his telling. His grandson Daniel sat forward on the sofa, hands gripped together, eyes wide. Did you pay them, Grandpa? The boy asked. Did you give Cyrus the money? Garrett's expression hardened, not with anger, with something deeper, something that lived in the marrow of old bones and ancient choices. Money, he said slowly, was never the real price, son. Cyrus didn't want dollars. He wanted power, wanted to own people. And once you pay a man like that, you never stop paying. He reached for the poker again, stirred the fire. Sparks rose like memories refusing to stay buried. I had a choice that night. Break my promise to Dakota or watch 5 children disappear into slavery with legal papers to make it right. He paused. Sometimes all your choices are bad. You just have to pick which bad you can live with. Daniel waited. Let me tell you about the night I learned what winter really means, Garrett said. When the cold isn't just outside, it's in your chest, in your choices, in everything you thought you knew about being a man. December 18th, 1884, 3 hours past midnight. Garrett sat in the barn loft, the drawing from Sarah spread out before him. 7 people holding hands. Our family. But they weren't his family. Couldn't be. He was a ghost. Ghosts didn't get families. They just haunted the living until the living moved on or the ghost finally faded. He should run, take Ash, ride north into Canada where Fort Laramie's warrant meant nothing. Start over somewhere new, become someone else. Let Eliza and her children handle their own problems. He'd done enough. More than enough. He'd kept them alive through winter. That was something. That should be enough. Should be. His hand touched the drawing again, traced the crude outline of the tall man in the dark hat. The figure Sarah had drawn standing beside her mother, hand on her shoulder. Protective, present, permanent. Everything he wasn't. Everything he'd promised himself he'd never try to be again. He folded the drawing, put it in his pocket next to Dakota's carved bird. Then he climbed down the ladder, saddled Ash, and rode toward Ash Hollow. Not to run, to prepare. If Cyrus wanted war, or Garrett would give him one. But not with guns. Never with guns. With something Cyrus wouldn't expect from a millionaire rancher living in a barn. He'd fight with the law. Sika. Howard Blackwell's house sat at the edge of town, a modest structure for a lawyer but well-maintained. Garrett knocked on the door hard enough to wake the dead. A minute passed, then footsteps. The door opened to reveal Blackwell in a nightshirt, holding a lamp, squinting against the cold. "Stone? It's 3 in the morning. I need you to draft documents," Garrett said. "Now, Shaw." Blackwell studied his face. Whatever he saw there made him step aside. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table. Blackwell lit more lamps, pulled out paper and ink. "What kind of documents?" he asked. "Adoption papers," Garrett said. "For 5 children, Elijah, Sarah, Thomas, Rebecca, and Mary Harper. Mother is Eliza Harper, widow. Father deceased, Daniel Harper, died 6 months ago in Missouri." Blackwell's pen paused. "You're adopting them?" "Not yet, but I need the paperwork ready. Legal, ironclad, something that says if anything happens to their mother, custody goes to a designated guardian." "You." "Yes." "Stone, adoption isn't something you rush into. There are processes, investigations, court approvals." "I don't need it finalized," Garrett said. "I just need papers that look official enough to scare off a debt collector who's threatening to sell those children to cover their dead father's debts." Blackwell set down his pen. "Explain." Garrett told him. All of it, Cyrus Blackwood, the $1,200 debt, the threat to take the children, the ultimatum, noon tomorrow. When he finished, Blackwell was quiet for a long moment. "You know," the lawyer said slowly, "debt transfer laws in Wyoming are complicated. Yes, family debt can transfer, but children cannot be sold as payment. Not legally. Not anymore. The territorial legislature outlawed indentured servitude for minors in 1882. Cyrus doesn't care about legal. He cares about what he can get away with in a town where the sheriff looks the other way." "Does Sheriff Harlow know about this?" "No." "Then tell him." Garrett shook his head. "Harlow has a telegram in his desk from Fort Laramie with my name on it. The moment I walk into his office, I'm in chains." Blackwell leaned back in his chair. "You're in an impossible position. That's why I need the papers. Something to wave in Cyrus's face that says these children are protected by law. Something that makes them more trouble than they're worth." "And if he calls your bluff?" "Then I pay him," Garrett said, "and I keep paying until I figure out how to stop." Blackwell picked up his pen again. "This will take hours. I have until noon. Then I better get started." Dawn came gray and cold. Garrett stood outside the Meyer cabin, watching smoke rise from the chimney. Inside, Eliza and her children were waking up. Starting another day of survival. They didn't know yet what was coming. He knocked on the door, gently this time. Not like Cyrus, not like a threat. Eliza opened it, saw him. Her expression shifted through surprise, confusion, wariness, and finally settled on something like resignation. "Mr. Monroe," she said. "Or should I say Mr. Stone? Garrett is fine. Is it true what that man said about you being a millionaire?" "Yes." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin was warmer now. His repairs had helped. The fire burned steadily, smoke drawing properly through the clean chimney. The children sat around it, sharing a breakfast of porridge and bread. They looked up as he entered. Elijah stood immediately, positioning himself between Garrett and his siblings, 12 years old and already thinking like a protector. "It's okay," Eliza said to her son. "He's not here to hurt us." "How do you know?" Elijah asked, not taking his eyes off Garrett. Because if he wanted to hurt us, he would have done it weeks ago, Eliza said. Instead, he fixed our home, brought us food, saved Rebecca's life. She turned to Garrett. Why did you lie? Why pretend to be a ranch hand when you own the ranch? Garrett removed his hat, stood in the doorway, too large for the small space, feeling every eye on him. Because 10 years ago, he said slowly, I was a soldier. I followed orders, bad orders, orders that killed people who didn't deserve to die. The children were silent now, listening. I tried to save one child, Garrett continued, a Cheyenne boy named Dakota. I ran away from my unit to protect him. I gave him my coat, built a fire, did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. He died anyway, in my arms, in the snow. Sarah made a small sound, recognition. She'd drawn that scene, had seen it somehow in her mind and put it on wood. When I came home, Garrett said, my father left me everything. 5,000 acres, hundreds of horses, more money than I knew what to do with. But I couldn't enjoy it, couldn't live in the big house, couldn't spend money on myself. Because Dakota never got to grow up, never got to have any of it. He looked at Eliza, then at each child in turn. So I've been trying to die slowly ever since, he said, until I saw your children. And I realized I'd been given another chance, not to save Dakota, I can't, but to save someone else, to maybe balance the scales just a little. Silence filled the cabin. Outside, wind rattled the walls. Then little Mary, 3 years old, slipped away from her mother and walked to Garrett, looked up at him with eyes that held no judgment, only curiosity. Are you sad? She asked. Garrett knelt down to her level. Yes. Mama says when you're sad, you need hugs. And before he could respond, she wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on. Garrett froze. His hands hovered in the air, uncertain where to go, what to do. He hadn't been hugged in 10 years. Hadn't let anyone that close. Slowly, carefully, he put his arms around the small body and held her. Something broke its bam, some dam he'd built to keep everything out. Water rose behind his eyes, but he forced it back down. Thank you, he whispered. Mary pulled back, smiled at him. You're welcome. Eliza's eyes were wet. Mr. Stone. Garrett, he corrected. Garrett, those men last night, are they really going to take my children? Not if I can help it. He reached into his coat, pulled out the documents Blackwell had finished just before dawn. These are guardianship papers. They state that in the event of your incapacity or death, custody of your children that transfers to me. It's not adoption. Not yet. But it's legal protection. If Cyrus tries to claim them for debt, these papers say he can't. Eliza took the documents, read them slowly. You'd do this? Take on 5 children you barely know? I'd do it to keep them safe. But why? We're nothing to you. Garrett looked at the children again, at Elijah trying to be brave, at Sarah with her drawings, at Thomas curious about everything, at Rebecca still recovering from pneumonia, at Mary who just hugged him like he deserved it. You're not nothing, he said quietly. The saloon at noon was exactly what you'd expect. Dark, smoky, smelling of whiskey and sweat and bad decisions. A handful of regulars nursed drinks at the bar. A card game occupied one corner table. And at another table, Cyrus Blackwood sat waiting, flanked by Bull and Frank. Garrett walked in at 2 minutes past noon, deliberately late. A small power play, showing he wasn't afraid, even though he was. He crossed to Cyrus's table, didn't sit, just stood there, hands visible, coat open to show he carried no gun. You're late, Cyrus said. You're lucky I am here at all. You bring the money? I brought something better. Garrett pulled out the guardianship documents, dropped them on the table. Legal protection. Those children are under my guardianship now. They can't be taken for debt. It's illegal. Cyrus picked up the papers, read them slowly, then smiled. Not the reaction Garrett had hoped for. Cute, Cyrus said. But there's a problem. These papers protect the children. They don't protect you. He reached into his own coat, pulled out a telegram, the same one Sheriff Harlow had in his desk. Somehow Cyrus had gotten a copy. Wanted for desertion, Cyrus read. Lieutenant Garrett Stone, bounty $800, dead or alive. He set the telegram on top of the guardianship papers. Here's the new deal, Cyrus said. You pay the widow's debt, 1,200. You pay my silence fee, 500. And you pay me another 1,000 for not turning you in right now. Total, $2,700 cash. Today. And if I refuse, then I walk across the street to the sheriff's office, show him this telegram, show him proof that Wade Monroe is actually Garrett Stone. You get arrested, sent to Fort Laramie, you hang. And while you're hanging, I still take the children, because their guardian will be dead. Cyrus leaned back in his chair. You've got 1 hour. Get the money or get a noose. Your choice. Garrett stood very still. Around him, the saloon had gone quiet. Everyone listening, everyone pretending not to. He could fight, could probably kill Cyrus before Bull or Frank drew their guns, could eliminate the threat right here, right now. But that would make him a murderer again. Would prove that 10 years of trying to be better meant nothing. Would prove he was still the man who burned Cheyenne villages. 1 hour, he said. Then he turned and walked out. The bank in Ash Hollow was small but functional. The manager, a nervous man named Peterson, looked up as Garrett entered. Mr. Monroe, Peterson said, what can I need to make a withdrawal, Garrett said, from my account in Denver. I know that takes time normally, but I need it today, now. Peterson blinked. Mr. Monroe, you have an account in Denver? Not Monroe, Stone, Garrett Stone. Check your records. My attorney is Howard Blackwell. He'll verify. Peterson's face went pale. Mr. Stone? The Mr. Stone? From Mustang Ridge? Yes. Sir, I had no idea. You've been living in a barn. I know. The withdrawal. Can you do it? Peterson fumbled with papers. How much do you need? $3,000. The banker nearly choked. That's a considerable sum. I'll need to wire Denver. Get authorization. It could take days. I have 1 hour. Sir, that's impossible. Garrett leaned across the desk. Peterson, there are 5 children who will be sold into slavery if I don't pay a debt collector in 1 hour. I have over $2 million sitting in banks across the West. I need 3,000 of it. Now, make it happen. Peterson stared at him, then nodded quickly. I'll send an urgent wire. Highest priority. But sir, even if Denver approves immediately, the cash has to be transported here. We don't keep that much on hand. How much do you have? Maybe 800 in the safe. I need 2,700 minimum. Peterson thought fast. I could collect from other businesses in town, ask them to accept bank drafts in exchange for cash. It's irregular, but if it's truly an emergency, it is. Give me 30 minutes. Garrett nodded, stepped outside. The town square spread before him. Normal day, normal people going about normal business, none of them knowing that 5 children's futures were being bartered inside a saloon. He looked toward the saloon. Cyrus would be in there, waiting, smiling, knowing he'd won, because men like Cyrus always won. They played dirty. They didn't care about rules or honor or doing the right thing. They just took what they wanted and left broken families in their wake. Garrett's hand went to his belt, to where a gun would hang if he still carried one. It would be so easy. Walk in there, put a bullet in Cyrus, another in Bull. Frank would run. Everyone knew Frank was a coward. 3 shots, 3 bodies. Problem solved. Except it wouldn't be solved, because he'd be a killer again. Because he'd prove that violence was still his answer. Because Dakota's ghost would look at him and see not the man who tried to save him, but the man who'd been part of the machine that destroyed his village. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned. Eliza stood there, bundled in her thin coat, all 5 children behind her. What are you doing here? He asked. We came to help, she said. There's nothing you can do. We can stand with you. She moved beside him, facing the saloon. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The children arranged themselves around them. Elijah on one side, Sarah on the other. Thomas, Rebecca, and Mary in between. 7 people, just like Sarah's drawing. You should go home, Garrett said quietly. This could get ugly. We don't have a home without you, Eliza said simply. So we stay. 30 minutes later, Peterson emerged from the bank carrying a leather satchel. He looked exhausted but triumphant. 2,700, he said, handing it to Garrett. Exact. It took calling in favors from every business in town, but we did it. Garrett took the satchel. It was heavy, not with the weight of money, with the weight of what it represented, freedom or slavery, depending on how you looked at it. "Thank you," he said. Peterson nodded, then lowering his voice. "Mr. Stone, everyone in town knows what you've been doing for that family. The gifts, the repairs, the medicine, we all know. And we're grateful someone still believes in helping others." He paused. "If Cyrus Blackwood thinks he can come into our town and terrorize decent people, he's wrong. There are 20 men with rifles watching that saloon right now. If he tries anything, anything at all, they'll handle it." Garrett looked around. Sure enough, figures stood in doorways, on rooftops, in windows, armed, waiting. The town had mobilized, for him, for Eliza, for 5 children they barely knew. Sometimes the West wasn't as lawless as people thought. "Tell them to stand down," Garrett said. "I don't want bloodshed." "Neither do we, but we'll be ready if you need us." Garrett nodded, turned to Eliza. "Take the children back to the cabin. Please, I don't want them to see this." "We're not leaving you, Baum," Elijah said. The boy's voice was firm, certain. "Son, you stood up for us," Elijah interrupted. "Now we stand up for you. That's what families do." Garrett looked at Eliza. She nodded. "All right," he said, "but stay behind me, no matter what." He crossed the street toward the saloon, 7 people moving as one. The satchel felt heavier with each step. Inside, Cyrus looked up as they entered. His smile widened. "Well, well," he said. "Brought the whole family. How touching." Garrett set the satchel on the table. 2,700, count it. Cyrus opened the bag, sorted through the bills slowly, taking his time, making Garrett wait. "Finally, it's all here." He looked up. "See, that wasn't so hard. Now you're 2,700 poorer, and I'm 2,700 richer. That's just business." "It's extortion," Garrett said. "Semantics." Cyrus closed the bag, stood. "Pleasure doing business with you, Stone. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again real soon." He walked toward the door. Bull and Frank followed. But as Cyrus passed Elijah, he paused, looked down at the boy. "You've got a good protector, kid," he said. "But protectors don't last forever. Remember that." Then he was gone, out into the daylight, mounting his horse, riding out of town with his men, the satchel of money secured to his saddle. Garrett stood very still, watching through the window. He'd lost. Paid the blackmail. Let the villain win. But the children were safe. That was what mattered, wasn't it? "Garrett," Eliza said softly, "he'll be back." "I know. What do we do?" He turned to face her, face the children. 7 people who had somehow become entangled in his attempt at redemption. "We prepare," he said, "because men like Cyrus always come back. And next time, I'll be ready." That night, back at the cabin, Garrett did something he hadn't done in 10 years. He taught Elijah how to fight. Not with guns, never guns, but with hands, with awareness, with the understanding that sometimes you had to stand your ground even when you were terrified. "Keep your weight on your back foot," Garrett instructed, demonstrating. "Front foot is for balance, back foot is for power." Elijah mimicked the stance, awkward at first, then better. "Good. Now if someone grabs you, don't pull away. Push into them, throws them off balance." They practiced for an hour, then 2. Thomas joined in, then Sarah, watching and learning even though girls weren't supposed to learn such things. Garrett didn't care about supposed to. He cared about prepared. Later, after the children had gone to sleep, he sat with Eliza by the fire. "You're training them for war," she said quietly. "I'm training them to survive." "It's the same thing out here." He didn't argue. She was right. "Tell me about Daniel," he said, changing the subject. "Your husband." Eliza was quiet for a moment. "He was a good man, weak but good. He tried to provide for us, took out loans to start a carpentry business. It failed. The loans came due. He couldn't pay. The stress killed him. Heart gave out one night while he was sleeping. And the debt transferred to you." "Yes, $600. Might as well have been 6,000. I had nothing. So we ran, came west thinking we could start over, thinking the debt couldn't follow us." She laughed bitterly. "We were wrong. Cyrus will come back," Garrett said. "Men like him always do. He'll find another excuse, another demand. It won't stop until one of us is dead or broken." "Then what do we do?" Garrett looked into the fire. We leave. All of us. Somewhere he can't find us. Where? We have no money, no resources. Winter's not over. I have both. Eliza turned to him. You'd do that? Abandon your ranch? Your life? For us? My life is a lie, Garrett said. I've been living like a ghost for 10 years. Maybe it's time to actually live. Or maybe, Eliza said softly, it's time to stop running. From Cyrus, from your past, from everything. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I, but maybe we figure it out together. She reached out, took his hand. Hers was small and rough from work. His was large and scarred from violence. Together they sat, holding on, watching the fire burn down to coals. Outside, the wind howled, winter deepening. But inside, something else was deepening too. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. December 21st arrived with a vengeance. The sky turned iron gray at dawn. Temperature dropped from 20 below to 30 below in an hour. Then 40 below. Wind picked up, shrieking across the plains like something alive and hungry. By noon, the blizzard had begun. Snow fell in sheets, thick, blinding, relentless. Visibility dropped to zero. The world became white noise and white death. At the Meyer cabin, Eliza frantically stuffed rags under the door to keep out the wind. Garrett had gone back to his ranch the night before to handle business, promising to return the next day. But the storm had come early, and now he wasn't here. The children huddled close to the fire. Eliza rationed the last of their food, half a loaf of bread, some beans, a little dried meat. Not enough, not nearly enough if the storm lasted more than a day. By evening, the temperature inside the cabin had dropped to barely above freezing, despite the fire. Wood was running low. Food was running out. Rebecca started coughing again. The wet, rattling cough that meant her pneumonia was trying to come back. "Mama," she whispered between coughs, "I'm cold." Eliza wrapped her in every blanket they had. It wasn't enough. By midnight, Rebecca's fever had returned, 104 degrees and climbing. Eliza held her daughter, rocking her, praying, but prayer felt thin against the storm, against the cold, against the reality of a sick child in a cabin that was barely holding together. Sarah sat beside her mother, holding Rebecca's hand. "She needs medicine." "I know, baby." "Where's Mr. Stone?" "I don't know." "He'll come," Thomas said with certainty. "He always comes." But morning arrived and Garrett didn't. The storm raged on, worse now. The cabin groaned under the assault. Snow piled against the walls, drifting higher until it covered the bottom half of the door. Eliza looked at her 5 children, at Rebecca burning with fever, at the others hollow-eyed with hunger and fear. This was how it ended. Not with debt collectors, not with violence, but with simple, brutal cold, with the West taking what the West always took. Everything. She closed her eyes and prayed again, not for rescue, just for the storm to take her first so she wouldn't have to watch her children die. Then, faint through the howling wind, a sound, knocking. She thought she was hallucinating, the cold playing tricks, but it came again, harder, more insistent. She stumbled to the door, pulled away the rags, forced it open against the snow piled outside. And there, collapsed in the doorway, covered in ice and snow and barely conscious, was Garrett Stone. He had come after all. The frame flickered. Back in 1924, old Garrett paused in his telling. His face had gone pale with memory. His hands trembled slightly on the armrests. Daniel leaned forward. "How did you survive, Grandpa? How did you make it through that storm?" Garrett looked at his grandson. The firelight cast shadows across his face, making him look ancient, ageless, like something carved from stone that had weathered 10,000 winters. "I didn't survive," he said quietly. "I died in that storm. The man I was, the ghost I'd been, died somewhere between Mustang Ridge and that cabin. What made it to the door wasn't me anymore." He paused. "It was someone who'd finally learned what it means to love something more than you love breathing." The old man stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Montana snow falling soft and peaceful, nothing like the killer storm of 40 years ago. "But I'm getting ahead of myself," he said. "Let me tell you about the longest 32 miles of my life." Garrett had left the ranch at 4 in the afternoon on December 20th. The sky was already darkening, but the weather reports said clear through tomorrow. The weather reports were wrong. By 6 p.m., the temperature had plummeted. By 7, the first flakes fell. By 8, he knew he was in trouble. But Rebecca needed medicine. The quinine was running low. The pneumonia was trying to come back. He'd promised to bring more. So he rode on. Ash, his loyal Morgan mare, pushed through the gathering storm. Her breath came in great clouds. Ice formed on her muzzle, her eyelashes, her mane. Just a little farther, girl, Garrett said, leaning close to her neck. We're almost there. But they weren't almost there. They were barely 10 miles in, 22 more to go. The storm intensified. Wind hit 50 miles an hour, then 60, then harder. Snow fell so thick, Garrett couldn't see Ash's head from his position in the saddle. He relied on her instincts. Horses could navigate by feel, by memory, by something humans had lost. But even Ash was struggling now. The snow was up to her chest. Each step was a battle, each breath a victory. At mile 15, disaster struck. Ash stepped wrong. Her hoof found empty air where earth should have been, a drift hiding a hole. She went down hard, front leg buckling at an angle that made Garrett's stomach turn. He rolled clear of the falling horse, hit the snow hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. For a moment, he just lay there. Everything white, everything cold, everything ending. Then he heard Ash screaming, the high, terrible sound a horse makes when it knows. He scrambled to hear him. She was thrashing, trying to stand on a leg that was broken below the knee, bone visible through torn skin, blood steaming black against the snow. No, Garrett whispered. No, no, no. He tried to calm her, tried to assess, but he already knew. A break like that, out here, in this cold. There was no saving her. Ash looked at him with eyes that held trust, even now, even in agony. She trusted him to make it right. Garrett pulled his knife. Not a gun, never a gun, but a knife would work. Fast cut to the jugular. She'd bleed out in seconds. No suffering. I'm sorry, he said, tears freezing on his face. You've been such a good friend. Such a good friend. Ash nickered softly, understanding maybe, or just acknowledging. Garrett made the cut. Quick, clean, merciful. The light went out of her eyes in seconds. He knelt beside her in the snow, one hand on her still warm neck, and wept. For the horse, for himself, for everything he'd ever failed to save. But the storm didn't care about grief. The storm just kept coming. Garrett stood, took the saddlebags. They held the medicine, the food, the supplies. 80 pounds, plus his coat, plus his rifle, plus himself. 17 miles to go. On foot, in 40 below wind chill, with visibility at 0. He should turn back, should find shelter, should save himself. But Rebecca needed medicine. Eliza needed food. 5 children needed someone who didn't run when things got hard. So Garrett shouldered the bags and started walking. Miles 16 through 20 were hell. Not the fire kind, the ice kind, the kind where every breath felt like inhaling broken glass, where your lungs burned and your eyes watered and the tears froze solid on your cheeks. Garrett walked, one foot, then the other, then the first again. Nothing existed except that rhythm. Step, step, step. His mind started to wander. Hypothermia's first gift. The pleasant drift toward not caring. He saw things in the snow. Dakota running ahead, laughing. His father standing by a fence post, waiting. Ash, alive again, nickering for him to follow. Not real, he told himself. Keep moving. But the hallucinations persisted, grew stronger. At mile 21, he fell, went down face first into a drift. The snow was almost soft, almost comfortable, like lying down in bed after a long day. Part of him wanted to stay there, just rest, just close his eyes for a minute. Get up, a voice said. He looked up. Through the swirling white, a figure stood, small, young, a Cheyenne boy in a cavalry coat too large for his frame. Dakota, Garrett whispered. You can't save me, the boy said. But you can save them. Get up. I can't. You can. Stand up, Stone. Stand up and walk. Garrett pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. The world spun, his legs shook, but he was upright. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. he said to the hallucination. Dakota smiled. You did save me. You tried. That's what matters. Now go save them. The vision faded. Garrett walked on. Mile 23 through 28 broke him completely. His body was shutting down, core temperature dropping, fingers and toes losing sensation. Frostbite claiming extremities one digit at a time. He fell into a crevasse, a hidden crack in the earth concealed by drifting snow. Dropped 20 feet, hit hard. Ribs cracked. Pain bloomed white and absolute. For 5 minutes he lay at the bottom, unable to move, unable to breathe without agony. This is where I die, he thought, in a hole, in the snow, alone. But then he thought of Mary's hug, of Sarah's drawings, of Elijah trying to be brave, of Thomas asking questions, of Rebecca fighting pneumonia, of Eliza who'd said maybe they could figure out living together. Not alone, he whispered. Not anymore. He pulled rope from his pack, fashioned a crude grappling hook from supplies. It took 6 throws before it caught the rim of the crevasse. Then he climbed, hand over hand, broken ribs grinding, frostbitten fingers barely able to grip. But he climbed, and when he reached the top, he didn't rest, just kept walking. 4 more miles, mile 29 through 32, were negotiated on pure will. His body had stopped working properly, stopped sending signals of pain or cold or need. Everything had gone numb, everything distant. He saw lights ahead, thought they were hallucinations at first, but they persisted, grew stronger. The cabin. He'd made it, 32 miles, through a killer storm, on foot, with broken ribs and frostbite and hypothermia. He'd made it. Garrett stumbled the last 100 yards, fell twice, got up both times, reached the door, knocked, heard movement inside. The door opened. Eliza stood there, backlit by firelight, her face transforming from fear to shock to something that might have been joy. She pulled him inside. He collapsed immediately. The warmth of the cabin hit him like a hammer after hours in the cold. Garrett, Eliza was saying. Oh God, Garrett. He tried to speak, couldn't. His jaw was frozen shut, his lips cracked and bleeding. But he managed to move his hand, pointed to the saddlebags he'd dropped. Medicine, he finally gasped. For Rebecca. Then the world went black. He woke 3 days later. The fever had come and gone, the delirium with it. Now there was just pain, clean and sharp and oddly clarifying. He was lying on blankets near the fire, warm, alive. Eliza sat beside him, dabbing his face with a damp cloth. You're awake, she said. Tears stood in her eyes. Rebecca, his voice came out as a croak. She's fine, the medicine worked. She's outside playing in the snow with her brothers and sisters. I made it then. You did. Eliza's hand touched his face. Gentle, careful. Dr. Klein said you shouldn't have survived. Said the frostbite alone should have killed you. 3 toes on your right foot, 2 fingers on your right hand. We had to amputate. Garrett looked at his hand, saw the bandages where digits used to be. Small price, he said. For what? He looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion in her face, the fear, the relief, the something else he couldn't quite name. For family, though, he said. Eliza's tears spilled over. You died for us. No, Garrett sat up slowly, ribs protesting. I lived for you. There's a difference. Outside, he could hear children laughing, playing, living. He'd made it, against everything, against sense and survival and the simple mathematics of cold and distance. He'd made it, because sometimes miracles weren't about divine intervention. Sometimes they were just about a broken man walking through a storm because people were waiting on the other side. That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza sat with him by the fire. Sheriff Harlow came by yesterday, she said quietly, while you were unconscious. Garrett tensed. And? He had a telegram. About you. About Fort Laramie. Did he arrest me? No. Eliza smiled slightly. He tore it up, right in front of me. Said any man who'd walk 32 miles through a blizzard to save children he barely knew wasn't a criminal. He was a hero, and heroes don't get arrested in his town. Garrett closed his eyes. I'm not a hero. What are you then? He thought about it, about Dakota, about 10 years of guilt, about a barn loft and a ghost existence, about 5 children and one woman who'd somehow become the center of everything. "I'm just a man trying to be better than he was," he said finally. "Then you're already more than most." She took his hand, the one with missing fingers, held it like it was precious, like the scars and damage didn't matter. "When you heal," she said, "I want you to move in here, with us, properly, not as a guardian, not as a benefactor, as family." "Eliza, I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but Garrett, my children already love you, and I—" She paused. "I'm starting to as well." Garrett looked at her, looked at the fire, looked at the cabin they'd built together out of nothing but need and determination. "I don't know how to be part of a family," he said. "Neither do I, not anymore. But maybe we learn together." Through the window, snow fell gently. The storm had passed, winter remained, but the worst was over. Garrett squeezed her hand with his remaining fingers. "Together," he agreed. And for the first time in 10 years, the word didn't sound like a lie. The fire in the 1924 hearth burned low. Garrett Stone, 78 years old and counted among the wealthiest men in Montana, sat forward in his chair. His grandson Daniel had barely moved for the past hour, transfixed by the story unfolding. "Did you marry her, Grandpa?" Daniel asked. "Did you become a real family?" Garrett's weathered face softened. The hardness that had marked the earlier parts of his story gave way to something gentler. Not weakness, just the opposite. The kind of strength that comes from allowing yourself to be vulnerable. "I did," he said, 6 months later. "But the road between surviving that storm and standing at an altar wasn't straight. Nothing worth having ever is." He reached for a leather-bound book on the side table, opened it. Inside, pressed between pages, a crude drawing, charcoal on wood, 7 people holding hands. "Sarah's first gift to me," Garrett said, showing it to his grandson. "She drew this before I was part of the family, before I even knew I wanted to be." Children see things adults miss. They see what could be, not just what is. He closed the book, set it aside. "Let me tell you about the spring that changed everything, about the day I learned that sometimes you have to break a promise to keep a bigger one, and about how family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people you die to protect." March 15th, 1885, 3 months after the blizzard. Garrett stood in the doorway of what was no longer the Meyer cabin. It had been transformed. New walls added, proper windows installed, a real door with hinges that didn't squeak, a stone chimney that drew smoke efficiently, and inside something even more transformative. Laughter. Thomas and Rebecca were playing some game involving a ball made of wrapped cloth. Sarah sat at the table sketching. Elijah was outside chopping wood with the careful precision Garrett had taught him. Little Mary sat on the floor talking to a doll made from corn husks and fabric scraps. Normal. It all looked so impossibly normal. Garrett had moved most of his things from the barn loft at Mustang Ridge. Not all. He still kept a bedroll there. Still worked the ranch during the day. But nights, he was here. Mornings, he woke to the smell of breakfast cooking. Evenings, he helped with lessons, teaching Elijah mathematics and Thomas how to read better. He'd never been happier. Which is exactly when everything fell apart. A rider approached. Fast. Urgent. Garrett recognized Jake Sutton, the ranch foreman, still operating under the assumption that he worked for an absentee owner. "Wade," Jake called, dismounting, then caught himself. "Sorry, Garrett. Still getting used to that." "What's wrong?" "Telegram came to the ranch for you." Jake handed it over. "From Fort Laramie." Garrett's stomach dropped. He opened it, read quickly. "Garrett Stone, stop court-martial scheduled April 1st, 1885. Stop required attendance. Stop failure to appear results in immediate warrant. Stop Colonel Whitmore presiding. Stop." He read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They didn't. "Bad news?" Eliza asked from the doorway. She'd come out, reading his expression. "They want me at Fort Laramie," Garrett said quietly, "for trial, desertion, insubordination, everything from 10 years ago." "When?" "April 1st, 2 weeks." Eliza's face went pale. "They'll hang you." "Maybe." "Maybe. Garrett, this is your life." He looked at her, at the cabin behind her, at the children visible through the windows, at everything he'd built from nothing but need and determination and the stubborn refusal to fail again. No, he said. That's my life. This is just what comes after. Don't talk like that. I have to go. If I don't, they'll come here. They'll arrest me in front of the children. I won't let them see that. Then we fight it, Eliza said. We get a lawyer. We testify. We tell them what kind of man you really are. They don't care what kind of man I am now. They care what kind of soldier I was then. Jake shifted uncomfortably. I could testify too. Tell them what you did during the blizzard, how you saved those kids. Civilian testimony won't matter in a military court, Garrett said, but he put a hand on Jake's shoulder. I appreciate it, though. That night, Garrett sat with each child individually, starting with the youngest. Mary, he said, kneeling beside her, I have to go away for a little while. Where? Her 3-year-old face scrunched with worry. To talk to some important people. Will you come back? He wanted to lie, wanted to promise, but he'd promised to Coda he'd keep him safe and broken that promise. Wouldn't do it again. I'm going to try very hard to come back, he said carefully. Okay. Mary threw her arms around his neck. I love you, Papa. The word hit him like a physical blow. Papa. Not Mr. Stone, not Garrett. Papa. I love you too, sweetheart. Similar conversations with Thomas, Rebecca, Sarah. Each one harder than the last. Finally, Elijah. The boy sat on the porch steps, whittling a piece of wood with the knife Garrett had given him. 12 years old and already moving like a young man instead of a child. You're going to Fort Laramie, Elijah said. Not a question. A statement. Yes. They're going to try to hang you. Probably. Then don't go. Garrett sat beside him. If I don't go, I'm running. And if I run, or none they'll chase, and when they catch me, they'll bring me back in chains. I'd rather walk in on my own feet. That's stupid. Maybe, but it's also honorable. Elijah was quiet for a moment, then, what happens to us if you don't come back? You'll be fine. The guardianship papers are legal. The ranch is in a trust that provides income. You'll have money, shelter, food, everything you need. Except you. Garrett had no answer for that. I want to come with you, Elijah said, to testify. No. Why not? Because I need you here, to be the man of the family, to protect your mother and sisters and brother. To be what I might not get to be. Elijah looked at him, eyes wet but not crying. 12 years old and already learning that men sometimes had to hold pain inside. You're coming back, the boy said. Not hope. Command. I'll try. No, you're coming back because we need you and you don't get to leave people who need you. Garrett pulled the boy into a hug, held him tight. You're right, he whispered. I don't. March 20th, 5 days before Garrett had to leave for Fort Laramie. Cyrus Blackwood rode back into their lives like a curse returning. Garrett was at Mustang Ridge, finalizing arrangements with Howard Blackwell, making sure the trust was ironclad, making sure Eliza and the children would be protected no matter what happened at Fort Laramie, which meant he wasn't at the cabin when Cyrus arrived. Eliza was alone with the children, doing laundry in the yard. The early spring sun was warm enough to dry clothes if you hung them right. She heard horses, looked up. 3 riders. Her blood went cold. Cyrus dismounted slowly. Bull and Frank flanked him, all 3 armed. Mrs. Harper, Cyrus said, tipping his hat in mock courtesy. Or should I say Mrs. Stone? Heard congratulations are in order. You and the millionaire getting hitched. We're engaged, Eliza said carefully. What do you want? I want what I'm owed. You were paid, $2,700. That was for the first debt. But see, I've been thinking. Your fiancé, he's got a lot of money, millions, and he's about to go to Fort Laramie and probably hang, which means you're about to be a very rich widow. Cyrus smiled, the kind of smile that preceded bad things. I figure you owe me an investment, call it $10,000, for my silence about certain matters, for my protection, for my goodwill. We don't have $10,000 in cash. Then you better find it, or I start talking to the right people. Military authorities, territorial judges, people who'd be very interested in a deserter living under a false name for 10 years. Sheriff Harlow already knows, Eliza said. He doesn't care. Harlow's one man. I know 20 others who do care. For the right price. Elijah appeared from around the cabin, carrying an armload of firewood. Saw the men, dropped the wood immediately. Get away from my mother, he said. Cyrus laughed. The puppy's got teeth. How cute. Bull stepped toward Elijah. The boy didn't back down. I said get away. Or what? Bull reached out, grabbed Elijah's shirt. What happened next happened fast. Elijah used what Garrett had taught him. Pushed forward instead of pulling back. Threw Bull off balance, then kicked hard at the man's knee. Bull went down with a shout. Not hurt badly, but surprised and angry. He surged back up, fist raised. That's when the rifle shot cracked across the yard. Everyone froze. Garrett stood 30 yards away, Winchester raised, smoke curling from the barrel. He'd fired into the air. Warning shot. But his eyes said the next one wouldn't be a warning. Touch that boy, Garrett said, voice cold as winter, and I put the next round through your skull. Bull backed away slowly, hands raised. Cyrus turned to face Garrett. You're breaking your own rules, Stone. I heard you don't use guns. I don't. Garrett walked closer, the rifle never wavering. But for you, I'll make an exception. You won't shoot. You're too honorable. Try me. Cyrus studied him, saw something in Garrett's eyes that made him reconsider. Fine, Cyrus said. We'll leave, for now. But Stone, you're going to Fort Laramie in 5 days. And when you're gone, I'm coming back. And there won't be anyone here to stop me from taking what I want. He mounted his horse. See you real soon, Mrs. Stone. Real soon. They rode off. Garrett lowered the rifle. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage, from the effort of not pulling the trigger. Are you all right? He asked Elijah. The boy nodded. I did what you taught me. You did perfect. Garrett pulled him into a quick hug, then looked at Elijah. This doesn't stop until Cyrus is in jail or dead. You can't kill him, Elijah said. That's what he wants. Give him an excuse to call it self-defense, to take everything. Then what do I do? You go to Fort Laramie, you clear your name, you come back a free man, and then we deal with Cyrus together. Legally. Garrett wanted to argue, but she was right. Running from Fort Laramie solved nothing. Killing Cyrus solved nothing. He had to face both problems head on. All right, he said, but while I'm gone, you stay in town, at the boarding house. Mrs. Kelty will put you up. I'll pay whatever it takes. Don't stay here alone, son. We'll be fine. Promise me. Eliza looked at him, saw the fear beneath the determination. I promise. March 25th. Garrett prepared to leave for Fort Laramie. The night before departure, Eliza came to him in the barn loft where he was packing supplies. I have something for you, she said. She handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it. A letter, in her careful handwriting. To whom it may concern, my name is Eliza Harper. I am a widow with 5 children. 3 months ago, we were starving and homeless. A man named Garrett Stone saved us, not because he had to, not because we could pay him, but because it was right. This man walked 32 miles through a blizzard that should have killed him to bring medicine to my sick daughter. He lost 3 toes and 2 fingers doing it. He nearly died, but he made it because he doesn't know how to quit on people who need him. If you hang him, you're not executing a deserter. You're murdering a hero, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure the world knows the difference. Signed, Eliza Harper, Ash Hollow, Wyoming Territory. Garrett read it twice, his throat tight. Will this help? Eliza asked. I don't know, but thank you. Garrett, she moved closer. Come back to me, to us. We're not finished building our family yet. He wanted to promise, but promises had weight, and he'd broken too many. Instead, he kissed her. First time, gentle and careful and full of all the things he couldn't say. When they pulled apart, both had tears. I'll try, he said. That's all I ask. Fort Laramie, Wyoming Territory. April 1st, 1885. The courtroom was military standard, stark, functional, no decoration except the American flag and the seal of the United States Army. Garrett sat at the defendant's table wearing civilian clothes. Clean but simple. He'd left the millionaire persona behind. This wasn't about money or status. This was about what he'd done, what he'd refused to do. The prosecution was Major John Bradford, 45 years, career officer, By the book to a fault, and presiding over everything, Colonel Marcus Whitmore, the man who'd given the order 10 years ago, the order Garrett had refused. Whitmore looked older, gray at the temples, lines deep around his mouth, but his eyes were the same, cold, certain. Lieutenant Garrett Stone, Whitmore began, reading from papers. You stand accused of desertion during active campaign, insubordination, theft of military property, and aiding an enemy combatant. How do you plead? Garrett stood. Guilty, sir, to all charges. Murmurs in the courtroom. Bradford looked surprised. Even Whitmore raised an eyebrow. You don't wish to mount a defense? Whitmore asked. No, sir. I did what I'm accused of. I won't lie about it. Very well. Major Bradford, present your case. Bradford stood, outlined the charges, read from reports, painted Garrett as a coward who abandoned his unit, stole from the army, and aided the enemy. It took an hour. Every word felt like a nail in a coffin. When Bradford finished, Whitmore asked, Lieutenant Stone, do you have anything to say before sentencing? May I call witnesses, sir? You just pled guilty. Witnesses are irrelevant. Not for guilt, sir, for context. Whitmore considered. Very well, but be brief. Garrett stood. I call Mrs. Eliza Harper. The courtroom doors opened. Eliza walked in, all 5 children behind her. Whitmore's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Surprise. Maybe concern. Mrs. Harper, Garrett said, please tell the court what happened last December. Eliza did, in simple, clear language, how they'd been starving, how Garrett had helped, how he'd nearly died in the blizzard, how he'd given everything and asked nothing. She handed the letter to Whitmore. He read it slowly. Then Elijah spoke. Sir, may I say something? This is irregular, Bradford protested. But Whitmore raised a hand. Let the boy speak. Elijah stood, 12 years old, shoulders back, voice steady. Mr. Stone taught me what it means to be a man. He said it's not about being the strongest or the toughest. It's about protecting people weaker than you, about doing what's right even when it costs everything. The boy looked directly at Whitmore. He saved us. And if you hang him for that, you're punishing honor. You're telling soldiers that mercy is wrong, that compassion is weakness. Is that what the Army wants to teach? Silence. Sarah stepped forward next. She didn't speak, just held up 3 drawings. First, Garrett giving food to starving children. Second, Garrett collapsed in the snow, covered in ice. Third, Garrett holding Dakota, the Cheyenne boy, in the winter night 10 years ago. That last one made Whitmore go still, very still. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. I dreamed it, Sarah said. Papa told me about a boy he tried to save, a boy who died. I drew what I saw in my head. This is why Papa helps us, because he couldn't help Dakota. Whitmore stared at the drawing for a long time, then voice rough. Clear the courtroom. Everyone except Stone and his family. Now. Bradford protested. Whitmore silenced him with a look. Everyone filed out, guards, spectators. Bradford, reluctant and angry. Only Whitmore, Garrett, Eliza, and the 5 children remained. The colonel stood, walked down from his bench, approached the drawing of Dakota. His name was Dakota, he asked. Yes, sir. How old? 7, sir. And you tried to save him? Yes, sir, I failed. Whitmore looked at Garrett, then at the children, then back at the drawing. I gave the order that night, he said quietly. Burn the village, kill everyone over 5. I said those words, and I've lived with them for 10 years. He walked to the window, stared out at the parade ground. I don't sleep, Stone. Haven't since that night. I see their faces, hear the screams, every time I close my eyes. Sir, you disobeyed me, you ran, you saved 1 child. Whitmore turned. And I've hated you for it, because you did what I didn't have the courage to do. You chose humanity over duty. You chose right over orders. He returned to the bench, sat heavily. I've been waiting 10 years to punish you, to make an example, to prove that soldiers follow orders no matter what. He looked at the children. But these 5 are alive because you didn't follow orders, because you learned from Dakota, because you became something better than a soldier. Whitmore picked up a gavel, set it down without striking. I can't undo the past. Can't bring back the people I killed with my orders, but I can do this. He looked at Garrett directly. Lieutenant Garrett Stone, this court finds you guilty of all charges. However, in light of extenuating circumstances and evidence of extraordinary character, the sentence is commuted. You are hereby granted full pardon, rank restored to captain, honorably discharged, all rights and privileges reinstated. Garrett couldn't speak, couldn't move. Furthermore, Whitmore continued, let the record show that Captain Stone acted with more honor in disobeying an immoral order than most officers show in a lifetime of obedience. He is a credit to the uniform he once wore. The gavel fell. This court is adjourned. Whitmore stood, walked to Garrett, extended his hand. Thank you, he said quietly, for showing me what courage really looks like. Garrett shook it. Oh, you just did the same thing. It takes courage to admit you were wrong. 10 years too late, but not too late to matter. Whitmore nodded, looked at the children one more time, then left through his private door. Eliza ran to Garrett. Threw her arms around him, the children piled on. 7 people holding each other in an empty courtroom. We're going home, Garrett said. All of us, Eliza confirmed. All of us. They returned to Ash Hollow on April 8th. Spring had arrived in full, grass greening, flowers blooming, the world shaking off winter and remembering how to live. But Cyrus was waiting. He struck on the night of April 10th. Garrett was at Mustang Ridge meeting with Jake about spring roundup. Eliza and the children were at the cabin preparing for bed. Cyrus came with 4 men this time. Bull and Frank plus 2 new faces, Pike and Jessup, both known guns for hire. They surrounded the cabin, kicked in the door. Eliza screamed, grabbed the children back toward the bedroom. You owe me, Cyrus said, and I'm collecting, one way or another. We don't have $10,000, Eliza said. Even if we did, I wouldn't give you a penny. Then I'll take the kids, sell them west. Mining camps need workers. 5 kids? I'll make 20,000 easy. Elijah stepped forward. No. Cyrus laughed. The puppy again. Where's your master, boy? Off getting rich while you get sold. He's coming. I don't think so. I think he's abandoned you. Just like he abandoned his unit. Just like he abandoned that Cheyenne brat. Stone's good at abandoning people. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Thomas tried to run. Frank caught him, held him by the collar. Let him go, Dabo, Sarah screamed. Shut up, Frank growled. Rebecca started coughing, stress triggering her lungs. Mary cried, and in that moment, Eliza saw everything she'd feared. Her family torn apart, her children taken. Everything Garrett had built, destroyed by one evil man with guns and greed. But then a voice from the doorway. Put the boy down. Everyone turned. Garrett stood there, no rifle this time. Just a revolver at his hip. The first gun he'd worn in 10 years. Stone, Cyrus said, smiling, finally grew a spine. I'm giving you one chance, Garrett said. Right away, now, don't come back. Or what, you'll shoot? We both know you don't have it in you. You're right, Garrett said. I don't want to kill you, but I will if you touch them. Big words, let's see action. Cyrus drew, fast, practiced. But Garrett was faster. The room exploded with sound. One shot, precise, perfect. Cyrus's gun flew from his hand, struck by Garrett's bullet before he could fire. The man screamed, clutching his hand. Next one goes through your heart, Garrett said. The gun didn't waver. Bull reached for his weapon. Garrett's gun swung to him. Don't. Bull froze. Frank, Pike, Jessup. Garrett looked at each man. You have families? People you love? Pike nodded slowly. Then think about them. Think about going home tonight. Or not going home. Your choice. One by one, they raised their hands. Step back. Only Cyrus remained defiant. You won't shoot. You're too good. I used to think that, Garrett said. Thought mercy was always the answer. But I was wrong. Sometimes mercy for the evil means cruelty to the innocent. He stepped into the cabin, the gun now inches from Cyrus's chest. You threaten my family again? I won't arrest you. I won't report you. I'll kill you. And I'll sleep fine afterward. Because some men don't deserve mercy. They deserve justice. That's murder. No, that's protection. Garrett stepped back. Get out, all of you, now. They left, scrambling, broken, defeated. But as Cyrus reached the door, he spat, "This isn't over." "Yes," Garrett said, "it is, because tomorrow Sheriff Harlow is getting a full report about your extortion, your threats, your attempt to kidnap children, and you'll be wanted across the territory. Run far enough, and you might escape, but you'll never stop running." Cyrus's face went white. "You're bluffing. Try me." The debt collector left, his men following like whipped dogs. Garrett closed the door, locked it. Then his legs gave out. He sat on the floor, the revolver still in his hand, shaking. Eliza knelt beside him, took the gun gently, set it aside. "You didn't kill him," she said. "I wanted to." "But you didn't. That's what matters." "I pointed a gun at a man, broke my promise to Dakota." "No." Eliza took his face in her hands. "Dakota would understand. You didn't kill out of hate. You protected out of love. There's a difference, Rochelle." Garrett pulled her close, held her, held the children as they surrounded him. "It's over," he whispered. "It's finally over." And for the first time in 10 years, he believed it. June 20th, 1885. Wedding day. The ceremony was simple. Held at the cabin, Pastor Wilson officiating, the entire town of Ash Hollow attending. Garrett wore a suit that actually fit. First time in a decade. He'd stopped hiding, stopped pretending to be Wade Monroe. He was Garrett Stone, millionaire, rancher, soon-to-be husband and father. Eliza wore a dress Sarah had helped make. White cotton with blue trim, simple but beautiful. The 5 children stood with them. Elijah as best man, Sarah as maid of honor, the others holding flowers, beaming. Pastor Wilson asked, "Do you, Garrett Stone, take Eliza Harper to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Eliza Harper, take Garrett Stone to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." They kissed, the crowd cheered, children laughed. 7 people, no longer just connected, but family, real and permanent and chosen. The reception lasted into evening, food and music and dancing. Garrett found himself smiling, actually smiling, not the ghost of one, a real smile that reached his eyes. Later, as the sun set, he stood with Eliza watching the children play. "We should expand the cabin," he said. "Make it bigger, maybe add a 2nd floor." "Or," Eliza said, "we could move to the main house at Mustang Ridge. Let the children have rooms of their own. Let them grow up with space and opportunity." Garrett hesitated. "That house has ghosts." "Then we fill it with life until the ghosts leave." She squeezed his hand. "We can't live in the past forever. It's time to build a future." He looked at her, at the wisdom in her eyes, at the strength. "You're right," he said. "Let's go home. Our real home." Summer passed into fall, fall into winter again. The family settled into Mustang Ridge Manor. The house transformed from a mausoleum of memory into a home of laughter and life. Garrett officially took over ranch operations. Jake stayed as foreman, now properly paid and respected. They expanded, hired more hands, implemented profit sharing. Elijah learned the business. Thomas learned horse training. Sarah continued drawing, her sketches now selling in Denver galleries. Rebecca grew strong, her pneumonia a distant memory. Mary started school, bright and curious. And Garrett learned to sleep through the night, learned to accept happiness without waiting for it to shatter, learned that redemption wasn't a destination but a daily practice. In October, they received word that Cyrus Blackwood had been arrested in Colorado. Extortion charges, multiple warrants. He'd hang or spend life in prison. Either way, he was gone. In December, on the anniversary of the blizzard, Garrett did something he had been planning for months. He commissioned a monument, bronze sculpture, 2 figures, a man kneeling holding a small boy, the boy's face peaceful, the man's face anguished. Beneath, an inscription, Dakota, 1867-1874, the boy who taught me what courage means. And below that, he did not die in vain. He saved a family he never met by teaching a man how to live again. They dedicated it on a cold December morning, the whole family present, plus Pastor Wilson, plus half the town. Garrett stood before it, hat in hand, and spoke words he'd held inside for 11 years. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Dakota. I tried. I gave everything I had, but it wasn't enough. His voice broke. Eliza took his hand. But I want you to know, Garrett continued, that you saved people. These 5 children are alive because you showed me what matters. These 5 children have a father because you taught me not to give up. He looked at the bronze figures. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for the gift of your life. And thank you for teaching me that failure isn't the end. It's just the beginning of trying again. Mary stepped forward, placed a small carved bird at the base of the monument. The one Garrett had been working on for 10 years. Finally finished. Wings spread wide. For Dakota, she said, so he can fly now. The frame shifted, back to 1924. The fire had burned down to coals. Daniel sat motionless, tears on his cheeks. That's the most beautiful story I've ever heard, Grandpa. Garrett nodded. It's not just a story, son. It's the truth. Every word. What had happened to Colonel Whitmore? He retired a year later, started a school for orphans in Denver, spent the rest of his life trying to make amends. We stayed friends until he died in 1920. Good man, just got lost for a while. And Elijah, Mom's dad, your grandfather became the finest ranch manager in Montana. Married at 20, had your mother at 22. Taught her everything I taught him about honor and family and doing what's right even when it costs. Garrett stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, Mustang Ridge spread out under moonlight. 50 years of building, of growing, of becoming something that mattered. The lesson, Daniel, he said, isn't that I was a hero. I wasn't. I was a broken man who got a second chance. He turned to his grandson. The lesson is that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. That family isn't blood, it's choice. That money means nothing if you don't use it to make the world better. And that sometimes the best thing you can do is keep walking through the storm even when every part of you wants to quit. Because people are waiting on the other side, Daniel said. Exactly. Through the window, lights appeared in the driveway, cars arriving. The rest of the family? Eliza's descendants. 3 generations gathering for Christmas. 18 people in total. All because one broken man decided to help one starving family 40 years ago. Come on, Garrett said, putting an arm around his grandson. Let's go meet them. Your great-grandmother will want to see you. Is Grandma Eliza still strong? Garrett smiled. Stronger than me, always has been. They walked together toward the front door, toward family, toward the future built on a foundation of second chances and stubborn grace. Behind them, the fire died to ash, but the warmth remained. Some things, once kindled, burn forever. Epilogue. Garrett Stone died in his sleep on March 3, 1931. He was 85 years old. Eliza followed him 3 years later. She was 76. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking Mustang Ridge, beneath a shared headstone that read simply, Garrett and Eliza Stone together, they saved each other. Not far away, the monument to Dakota still stands, maintained by the family, visited by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who never knew the Cheyenne boy but understand what he meant. The ranch continued for generations, still operates today under the Stone family name, still practices profit sharing, still believes that wealth is meaningless unless it serves. The 5 children Garrett saved went on to remarkable lives. Elijah became a state senator, fought for workers' rights and fair wages until his death at 70. Sarah became one of the West's most celebrated artists. Her drawings of frontier life hang in museums across America. Thomas founded a horse training school that operated for 60 years, taught thousands, never turned away a student who couldn't pay. Rebecca became a doctor, established the first free clinic in Montana, saved countless lives. Mary became a teacher, educated 3 generations of children, was beloved by everyone who knew her. Between them, they had 43 children, over 100 grandchildren, hundreds more great-grandchildren, and all because a broken soldier decided one winter day that he was tired of failing, tired of running, tired of being a ghost. All because he learned that redemption doesn't come from forgetting your failures. It comes from using them to become something better. All because 5 starving children and 1 desperate mother needed someone who'd already lost everything and therefore had nothing left to lose. Except, as it turned out, he had everything to gain. Family, purpose, peace, love. The things that can't be bought or inherited or stolen. Only built, one hard choice at a time, one storm at a time, one child at a time, until broken becomes whole, until ghost becomes man, until silence becomes story. A story told by firelight on winter nights to grandchildren who need to hear it, who need to know that no matter how broken you are, no matter how far you've fallen, there's always a path back. You just have to be willing to walk it, even if it's 32 miles, even if it's through a blizzard, even if you lose pieces of yourself along the way. Because sometimes the only way to find yourself is to give yourself away. And sometimes the best legacy you can leave isn't money or land or monuments. It's simply this. You tried. You loved. You didn't quit. And that, in the end, is more than enough.